Welcome back to the Ultimate Trumpet Podcast. I'm Bella, here with Adam, and today we are getting into something that I think is going to hit differently for a lot of players. This episode is based on an article on trumpetstudio.com by Michael Droste. That's D-R-O-S-T-E, pronounced Droste. And if you have not been reading his stuff over there, you are missing out. The article is called The Mouthpieces That Changed How I Play, and it is part history lesson, part masterclass, and honestly, part confession.
Yeah, and I want to say up front, this is not a beginner mouthpiece guide. This is not, should I buy a Bach 3C or a 5C? That's a fine question, but that's not what we're doing today. This is about pieces with real pedigree. Pieces connected to Adolph Herseth, to Arnold Jacobs, to Ronald Rahm. Pieces that Michael Droste had custom built to his own documented specifications. This is the deep end of the mouthpiece world, and we're going all the way in.
So let's start at the top. The first piece Michael writes about is a Bach 1C screw rim mouthpiece, but it's not a standard Bach. The rim has been machined by Schilke to 1CH specifications, reportedly built to match the setup favored by Adolph Herseth, the principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra from 1948 to 2001.
53 years in the same chair. Let that sink in. In an era of national auditions and rotating personnel, Herseth held the principal chair in Chicago for over half a century. His sound was enormous, centered, authoritative, the kind of sound that fills a hall without any apparent effort. And the 1C is the mouthpiece that supported that.
Now, for players who haven't spent time on a 1C, it's one of the larger diameter, deeper cup options in the Bach catalog. It is not a forgiving mouthpiece. You need a strong, well-developed embouchure. You need real air support. You can't fake it on a 1C the way you might get away with on something shallower.
Michael puts it really well in the article. He says playing on a 1C is playing without a net. The tone is either there or it isn't, and what the Schilke rim adds to that is precision. Schilke's manufacturing tolerances, their rim consistency and surface finish, widely regarded as superior to Bach's. So you've got the Bach cup and body doing what a Bach 1C does, but you've got a Schilke-machined rim giving you a contact point that's built to an entirely different level of quality.
And Michael plays this mouthpiece. Not every day. He's honest about that. The demands are significant, but he does play it. And he says it teaches him something every time. It insists on proper air, proper support, a kind of commitment to the sound that changes how you play even after you put it down. I love that framing.
It's the difference between equipment as a crutch and equipment as a teacher. Some mouthpieces make things easier. This one makes you better. Those are different things.
Okay, so from Herseth, we move to Arnold Jacobs, and this is where the article gets genuinely extraordinary. Michael owns 3 items from Arnold Jacobs' personal collection, purchased at a state sale: the Schilke Air Teaching Aid, the Mouthpiece Visualizer, and a wooden French horn mouthpiece.
Before we get into the pieces themselves, we have to talk about who Jacobs was. Because if you're not deep in the brass pedagogy world, you might not fully appreciate what we're talking about. Arnold Jacobs was the principal tubist of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra from 1944 to 1988. But that title, as Michael says in the article, dramatically undersells what he actually was. He was a physiologist, a psychologist, a researcher, and a teacher whose influence extended across every brass instrument, across generations of players who traveled from around the world to study with him.
He had a severe respiratory condition from childhood that forced him to study his own breathing with unusual rigor. And out of that necessity came a lifetime of research into the physiology of breathing, the mechanics of embouchure, and the psychology of performance. He became, over time, arguably the most knowledgeable person on the planet when it came to how brass players breathe, why they tense up, and how to fix it.
His entire methodology was built around 2 concepts he called song and wind. Song was the musical concept. the idea in your mind of what the music should sound like. Wind was the physical delivery system, the air moving through the instrument. And Jacobs believed and demonstrated over and over with thousands of students that most problems in brass playing are not fundamentally mechanical. They're conceptual. Players overthink what their embouchure is doing, their aperture, their tongue position. And that overthinking produces tension. And tension destroys playing.
The solution was to flood the mind with musical concept and let the body's natural intelligence handle the mechanics. Simple to say, extraordinarily difficult to actually teach. Jacobs had a collection of tools and techniques designed to redirect that mental energy and retrain the habits underneath, which is exactly why these teaching aids exist.
Now here's where Michael gets personal. And I think this is one of the most honest and important parts of the entire article. He never took a lesson with Arnold Jacobs. He wanted to. He thought about it. And he didn't go.
The way it worked was this. You called Jacobs on Sunday night, and if he had availability, you could schedule a lesson for the following week. The price was $80. $80 to sit in front of arguably the greatest brass pedagogue alive.
And Michael talks himself out of it, convinced himself that Jacobs was primarily for orchestral players, that he wasn't on that track, that maybe the timing wasn't right, and he calls it out for what it is, genuine regret.
Which I think is worth sitting with for a second, because I suspect a lot of players have done the same thing. Talked themselves out of something valuable because they decided in advance it wasn't for them. Jacobs didn't care what track you were on. His insights were fundamental, and the players who went came back transformed.
The stories about those lessons are legendary. You'd walk in and Jacobs would say, "Play something for me." No setup, no warm-up routine, just play something. And within a few minutes, he'd have identified exactly what was getting in your way.
And there's a story in the article that I think is genuinely funny, and also kind of devastating if you've spent years doing Clarke studies. Apparently, if you walked in and played a Clarke Technical Study as your opening piece, really dug into it, showed off your technique, Jacobs would get noticeably unhappy. Not angry exactly, but frustrated.
Because in his view, the Clarke studies, when used the wrong way, represented exactly the kind of thinking he was trying to undo. Too much emphasis on mechanical execution, on finger patterns and articulation as ends in themselves, divorced from musical concept. Michael compares it to showing a chef your mise en place without ever cooking anything. Jacobs wasn't interested in your preparation. He wanted to hear you make music.
And that's not a knock on the Clarke studies themselves. They're genuinely useful when used correctly. It's about the mindset, the confusion of technical facility with musical development. Jacobs could hear that confusion immediately, and if your opening statement was a demonstration of mechanical efficiency rather than musical expression, he already knew what he was dealing with.
So, the actual teaching aids. Let's go through them. First, the Schilke-manufactured, Jacobs Air Teaching Aid. This is a device Jacobs designed, used to make airflow visible and tangible during lessons. He was obsessive about helping students feel and understand their air, not as an abstract concept, but as a physical experience they could perceive and control. And this piece has a direct connection to Schilke, the Chicago manufacturer that was deeply tied to the CSO brass section for decades.
Second, and this is the one that's most technically interesting to me, the Mouthpiece Visualizer. And Michael makes a point of correcting a common misunderstanding about what this actually is. The visualizer is not just a rim, it has the full shank, so it inserts directly into the trumpet like a normal mouthpiece. But it has no cup. Where the cup would be, there is nothing. Open air.
The purpose of that design is brilliant. With the shank seated in the horn and no cup between the lips and the air column, the student buzzes directly into the instrument while Jacobs could stand in front of them and observe the embouchure in real time, the aperture, the lip contact, the position and symmetry of the set, while the player was engaged in actual playing, not posing in front of a mirror.
This is a fundamentally different diagnostic tool than a rim alone. The device is in the horn, in playing position, under the physical demands of actually producing a sound. The student's embouchure can't hide behind the cup. Jacobs could observe aperture issues, embouchure asymmetry, excessive pressure, and dozens of other habits that disappear the moment a normal mouthpiece is in place. It's a window into what is actually happening, not what the player thinks is happening.
And third, the wooden French horn mouthpiece. Jacobs worked with all brass players, and wooden mouthpieces have different acoustic and tactile properties than metal. The wood absorbs vibration differently. The surface against the lips is softer. Whether this piece was used for specific embouchure work, sensitivity training, or broader experimentation, Michael can only speculate. But it came from Jacobs's collection, and Jacobs did not keep things without purpose.
Okay, let's move to the custom pieces. And this is where Michael's own story becomes the center of the article. The GR Droste No. 4. This is his mouthpiece. And understanding what it actually is requires knowing the full story behind it.
Ronald Rom. As a founding member of the Canadian Brass, and as a solo artist, Rom developed a high register and a brilliant upper-range sound that was, for many players of that generation, a benchmark of what was possible. His approach wasn't simply about power or endurance, it was about efficiency. His embouchure was calibrated for maximum efficiency at high frequencies.
When Michael reached out to GR Mouthpieces about his custom piece, they responded with a letter confirming something remarkable. GR has only one invoice for Ronald Rom, a Rom No. 4. And from that single documented order, GR had everything they needed to build to his exact specifications.
The specs are: rim approximately 64 inner diameter, very wide and cushioned. Bore standard GR27. Cup approximately an M cup. Volume .078. The mouthpiece GR built for Michael is officially documented as Custom Trumpet Mouthpiece, Gold Droste, ROM No. 4, Program 1056, No. 1-7272BB, GR Classic Blank. A precisely documented, individually numbered piece built from ROM's actual recorded specifications, finished in gold plate.
Program 1056 exists in GR's records. Michael's mouthpiece can be traced. That level of documentation is unusual even in the custom mouthpiece world. The Droste No. 4 is not inspired by Rom's playing. It is built from the same geometric blueprint that GR used when Rom himself ordered his piece.
And then there's the other custom, the Schilke Droste, a shallow-body 10A4Z with Zinger backbore. The 10A4Z cup shape was popularized by Bill Chase, the legendary lead player and band leader whose extraordinary high range defined what lead trumpet could sound like in the early 1970s. This is a dedicated lead and high-register tool built for maximum efficiency in the stratosphere.
The Zinger backbore provides a specific kind of resistance and feedback in the upper register. It fights back, and that resistance is the point. Many lead players find that a certain amount of back pressure helps them regulate and control extreme high notes in ways that a free-blowing backbore doesn't. Getting to this mouthpiece took years of trial and refinement.
Michael also talks about his Schilke 15A4, the workhorse, the industry standard for lead and commercial playing. He owns both a standard version and a gold-plated piccolo version. And the piccolo version lets him maintain the same rim feel across both horns, which is a genuinely underappreciated aspect of multi-horn playing. When you switch between B-flat and piccolo and the rim feels different, your body has to recalibrate. When it feels the same, you can just play.
And then there's the Chicago thread that runs through the whole collection. Herseth was CSO principal trumpet, Jacobs was CSO principal tuba, Schilke was a Chicago company with deep ties to CSO brass players. Michael points this out, and it's worth sitting with. Chicago in the mid to late 20th century was arguably the center of American brass playing. The concentration of extraordinary orchestral standards, the Jacobs pedagogical influence, and the Schilke manufacturing presence created something that shaped the way we all play today.
And the article ends with something I want to read because I think Michael nails it here. The most important thing he's learned from spending time with this collection is that great players don't succeed because of their equipment. Herseth's sound didn't come from the rim. Rahm's high register is not the product of a 64 ID cup. The equipment matters, but it matters in a secondary supporting role. What these pieces have is context. They carry the stories of the players connected to them, and those stories are instructive.
Equipment is information. The best players use it as such, gathering data, refining their understanding, making choices that reflect genuine self-knowledge rather than marketing influence. The mouthpieces in this collection are a record of what Michael has learned over decades of playing and teaching. That's what this article is really about.
And then there's the final line of the article, and I think it's the line that stays with you. Michael says, "If you ever get the chance to take a lesson with someone like Arnold Jacobs, and he tells you he has an opening next week, you go. You don't talk yourself out of it. You just go."
If you want to read the full article, and you should, because there's more detail on every piece we covered today, head over to trumpetstudio.com. That's where Michael Drosty publishes everything, and it's the home base for this podcast.
And if you're looking for material to work on while you're thinking about all of this, the equipment side is only part of the equation. The practice side matters just as much. Be sure to check out the Ultimate Warm-Up Book for Trumpet and the Ultimate Technical Study for Trumpet. If you're getting ready for the gigging season, don't forget your copy of the Ultimate Wedding Book for Trumpet. All of those are available at trumpetstudio.com.
If you're enjoying the show, please rate and like us on the App Store. It genuinely helps other trumpet players find the podcast. And if you haven't downloaded the Trumpet Studio, Learn to Play app yet. It's available on the App Store right now.
That's episode 15. Thanks for listening. Now go practice.